Hello and welcome to Heritage Auctions. My name is Christina Reese and I am here today with Aviva Lehman. She is our Senior Vice President of American Art, and Sarahjane Blum. She is our Director of Illustration Art. And we're going to talk about two auctions that we have coming up on November 15th. One is the American Art Sale, it's our big one. One is our big illustration art sale. We have them on the same day.
Big events.
Let's talk about that. Why
Flushing
are we
the
doing
formats
this back to back? What is this relationship between illustration art and classic American art?
Well, first I want to say how exciting it is to do another video with you, Christina, and this is our first one with Sarahjane. I think it'll be the first of many to come. But Sarahjane and I are sort of consider us the Thelma and Louise of illustration and American art right now for Heritage Auctions. So we decided together, once Sarahjane joined Heritage a year ago. Has it been a year ago now?
Not even.
I can't remember life without you here. But when Sarahjane joined with her incredible knowledge base of illustration, but where areas I know very well, Golden Age illustration, I know nothing about sci-fi, pulp, and all this incredible material that Sarahjane knows inside and out. So once we started talking, we realized that the time has come for us to join forces and let the world know that we are stronger together. We want to bridge our categories of standalone illustration art and American art because there is such a great synergy, there's such a crossover between what we're selling. We want our audience to see both of us as one entity, really.
Right. There's often, in the American art sales, it's not unusual to have Norman Rockwell paintings, J.C. Leyendecker paintings, that kind of thing.
That's right.
Syndoc happens in our American art sales, but
yeah.
also in our illustration art sales. So on that note, I will say that one of the, these are both tightly curated, smaller sales. They're very carefully curated. These are higher value lots. One of the parts of the American art sale is the Boy Scouts of America Settlement Trust.
Absolutely. So we had to put one painting from the BSA Settlement Trust up on our wall to represent this incredible group of 25 works that we are selling, sort of as a bridge between the illustration auction that will happen at 11 o'clock on the 15th of November and the standalone American art auction, which will start at 2 o'clock. But it's sort of an embarrassment of riches surrounding us because with the 25 lots from the BSA Settlement Trust, tune in, go to ha.com so you can see our video specifically focused on the Boy Scout material, but having this work right here, this is one of the paintings that is part of the 25 works that we'll be offering. And Sarahjane and I loved putting them together, sort of starting the American auction with the 25 works from the Boy Scouts. And so that people understand that what we're doing with illustration is now a continuation and continuing to tell the story into American art. So I'm not going to give away too much about Boy Scouts, but can I just say that I think it's sort of cool to have a Rockwell next to a sergeant, and I think it sort of works. And that's what we're all about. So, and don't forget that many of the artists in the traditional blue chip wheelhouse of American art, George Bellows, Winslow Homer, they began as illustrators. So when I see this Rockwell, I think about not only obviously Rockwell and his incredible legacy, but this can also remind you a little bit of Winslow Homer from the 1870s, figures, children in a field. It's hanging next to a sergeant, which is hanging next to another illustration, which is hanging next to a Child Hassam, who also was an illustrator. So we want our audience to understand that there is a very strong and meaningful relationship between early American art all the way up until bleeding edge illustration art. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would definitely agree. I mean, I often say that when people think about American art, they're almost always thinking about illustration art. There's definitely American art as we come to it from people who are speaking to specific groups of collectors. And then there's American art as just the world knows it. And I think that if we're polling 10 people who are not art collectors about American art and trying to get them to name American art, a lot of them are gonna be coming up with Rockwell. For a long time, Maxfield Parrish was the most well-known artist in the world. So illustration is the driving force of American art. And a lot of these distinctions that we've made between what we consider to be high art, what we consider to be commercial art, have really not served our ability to look at art, not served our ability to kind of talk about why people resonate with a beautiful picture.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I wanted to ask both of you, because Sarahjane, you are still somewhat new here at Heritage, although illustration art as a category for us is not particularly new. We've been working on it and cultivating it for years. Both of your categories are evolving, changing, growing as Heritage continues to grow, and I wanted both of you to address that a little bit, how things are evolving and what direction you think you're taking the category into.
I mean, one thing I think is particularly exciting about being at Heritage, working on illustration art, is that not only have we cultivated the best illustration art department among any auction house, and we're already, when I came on, we were already known for being, you know, the preeminent auction house for illustration art specifically, but that you see it in all sorts of departments. You see it in American art, you see it in comic art, you see it in entertainment, you see illustration coming up everywhere, because when people are passionate about things, that is what they do. They start making art with it, about it, and for it. So I think that one thing that I'm really excited to be doing with the illustration art department, alongside trying to bring it into just more explicit conversation with American art more broadly, is also to be bringing it into explicit conversation with some of these other departments, and to really just get people who are collecting movie poster art from the experience of movie poster art to go, why is this visual so powerful? How are you relating to the work of Bob Peak? And when you discover you love the work of this artist, where are the other places you can take that? And the same thing with growing our collectors who are coming from the American art to looking more seriously at some of these newer illustrators, these illustrators who they might not have heard of, because what happened was, one of the reasons why you think about American art as having blue chip illustrators in it in the earlier 20th century and not so much in the later 20th century is, representational art was not as popular in fine art movements after a time, whereas representational art took over the whole world. When you think about what comics is a form of narrative art. It's representational art. And so you actually see illustration growing in the moment when it's split apart from American. And I think that there's a lot of interesting ways we can be looking about it and talking about it when we actually decide to flag it, when we notice it, when it's there.
Right. It's interesting when you look at this range and you think about the US and its history, and you look at the range of works that are on this wall right now, you see the scope, you see these years and years, and it is mostly figurative, obviously. But one thing that Aviva was pointing out before we turned the video on was even just a sympathy between this work and this work.
Absolutely. That's what I love about this, because I'm listening to what Sarahjane is saying, and I completely agree with everything, because what you touched on is a very important point, I think. I believe one of the reasons we do so well with illustration art at Heritage is because we do so much with comic art, and we really cross-pollinate a lot of historical categories like coins and Americana and even presidential memorabilia. And we've observed with each passing season how many new buyers and interested clients come to us from those categories, because we've learned that as Americans, and we're as an American auction house, collectors that come to us for any one of our 50, 60 categories, I forgot how many we have at this point, they're coming to find something that relates very strongly to American history.
Right.
That's the common thread between comic art and illustration art and American art and many of the other categories, because everything you're seeing here, a Sargent next to a Rockwell, next to this incredible, forgive me, I'm not even sure who this I'm not familiar with this artist.
This is some amazing work by James Avati, who is one of the best paperback artists of the 20th century. It is illustrating a William Faulkner. I mean, to go to your point about what illustration means in terms of culture, but it's not illustrating just a Faulkner like the first edition. It's illustrating Faulkner as he was brought to the public for the paperback market. So it's almost purposefully what we would call today almost clickbaity. It's really leading with something that's a little bit emotional, a little bit lurid, trying to bring you to the beating heart of the story immediately in a way that you can connect with.
I love that. It's so true. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about so much of a historical American art, even going back to Emanuel Leutze, Washington Crossing the Delaware, or Last of the Mohicans, a painting derived from James Fenimore Cooper. There's always been such a logical hand-in-hand relationship between writers, philosophers, painters, architects. You know, you've got Stanford White, who worked with Augustus St. Gaudens. You've got John Singer Sargent, and I have to say, I really am loving this moment, the Avati Sargent moment here, because certain scholars of a bygone era may be turning in their graves that we are suggesting that these two works hang together, but I think it's incredible, because when you really think about the auction industry and what people have considered fine art in terms of, you know, getting to the 6 and eventually 7 and now 8-figure mark, Rockwell was not one of those artists that you saw in an auction catalog. You saw Hudson River School, you saw a George Washington portrait. You didn't really see a lot of Rockwell until maybe 20 years ago.
That's right.
And at that time, traditionalists scoffed at that because they said, no, it doesn't have any place going next to my Frederick Church painting. But those are the lots that bring in the most interest, that get the biggest prices. So then we started putting Sendak in auctions, and then we started putting Patrick Nagel into an auction, or any contemporary 20th century Mort Kunstler, and these artists are getting incredible prices. So we are saying, let's continue what we've done with Rockwell and Leyendecker and broaden the category of American art to include the more contemporary 20th century and perhaps even 21st century illustrators. Because what these artists are doing today, what Sarahjane has in her auction, is continuing the tradition of what American painters have been doing for over 200 years. So whereas other auction houses are cherry picking out and reinventing other categories and taking American material and putting it into the context of Impressionist and Modern or post-war and contemporary, what Sarahjane and I are doing is bringing in the Avatis and this incredible
The Robert P.
Oh my gosh, this stops my heart, and I don't know much about this artist, but it feels so powerful.
But you know what I want to tell you? You do know more about this artist because you look at this, and even if you don't remember where you've seen it, this is the Apocalypse Now final movie poster art.
It's in your blood.
You saw it your whole life.
Blood.
It was
gives me
hanging
goosebumps.
in like somebody's older brother's bedroom.
So
this
true.
is something that you have been living with your whole life in the way that people for generations were living with Rockwell's.
I love that.
And the idea that both of your categories are just getting more robust the whole time. I mean, we had a Robert Peake, we had the original artwork of the poster that he did for Apocalypse Now for the European market, which we sold in 2021, but we sold that through our movie posters category. Is there any infighting amongst categories? Like, we want this in our auction, not you don't get to have it in your auction. Can we explain for our audience why that doesn't really necessarily happen, and yet?
Well, I mean, why I would say it doesn't happen is because of exactly what Aviva was speaking to earlier, that we know that the way you grow interest in things is by making them exciting to people. And, the auction industry, and this is fortunately really changing just with the internet and how people can be looking at a lot. You don't have to be waiting until you've been approved to be getting mailed a catalog and getting that catalog to then read a little bit about something and learn about it in the way that it used to be. But you still find that people who have been movie poster collectors in the past might be seeing a lot of movie posters, who've been Sargent collectors in the past might be seeing the American art sale, and they're not going to be introduced to these other works unless people actually say, you're welcome at the party. You're welcome to be interested in these works.
Right.
And I think that it's really one of the greatest strengths of Heritage that we do provide all of these touch points where people can be introduced to different genres of collecting for the first time.
So what are some of the highlights of the American Art Auction that you're especially excited about outside of the Boy Scouts of America offerings, which are also spectacular?
It's a good sale. I was working on the catalog layout this morning, just a few hours ago, and I was thinking it's a tiny but mighty auction. So I think it's 82 lots. But again, I keep going back. I keep the tagline in my head while I'm working on the essays and catalog proofing. I just keep thinking, goodness, this is an embarrassment of riches. Because we've got everything, once again, in this auction from Hudson River School. Not as much as other seasons. Every auction takes on its own flavor, its own personality. And I think it was sort of fate and kismet that we decided to join forces this season, because our auction is very rich with blue chip examples, museum quality examples by not only Norman Rockwell, but Joseph Christian Leindecker. My goodness, I mean, these works behind me, these incredible Saturday Evening Post covers from the Michael Dolis family collection. And Michael Dolis was an illustrator in his own right. He did work for the Saturday Evening Post, but these are coming from this beautiful collection of works that the artist Michael Dolis acquired directly from Leindecker. They had a relationship. He was close with Rockwell and Leindecker. And he was able to select. Leindecker said, pick one. I know you love my work. I'm happy to give you one. And he went into Leindecker's home and picked 10. He picked 10 Saturday Evening Post covers that he thought, as an artist. I love works that artists pick themselves,
me
you know?
too, yes.
So he picked 10 that are all incredible, and they all complement each other, but they showcase Leindecker's talents in different ways. So we are beginning this season with 2 of the works from the Dolis family collection, 2 post covers, had to put an incredible holiday-themed work, and this incredibly beautiful scene of this circus scene of the ballerina on horseback. And what Sarahjane and I, we were sort of selecting which works to include in round 1 from this collection, and we thought it would be a really nice counterbalance, this sort of girly feminine energy, the pinks, the reds, the hair, the curls. It's a nice counterbalance to all the Boy Scouts and the Eagle Scouts. So we sort of have a little yin-yang going on in the Leindecker world in this auction. But they're incredibly important works, and what I also love about them, I just love a little backstory. Michael Dolis, once he acquired these works, he kept them under his bed for decades. Under his bed, because they were so precious to him. You know, you hear this from time to time. So when his children were gifted these works, they finally got them framed. They've been on to tour to exhibitions in museums, and they've sort of brought them back to life. They've been hiding and waiting for us to show them to the world under a bed for something like 30, 40 years. So we're really excited about those. If we're going to talk about illustration, I've got to mention the incredible Maxfield Parrish in the auction.
Yeah, it is incredible.
Incredible, mind-blowing. And it's the old woman who lived in a shoe. It was from his seminal Fisk Tire advertising series. And you've got to see this work in person, because Parrish is the master of glazing and doing layers and showing beautiful, almost jewel-like effect of his oil on his canvas that creates this almost this 3-dimensional atmospheric experience when you look at his works. But what's really cool about this Parrish is that it's got the landscape, it's got the fantastical vibe, but right in the center, in the house, which is constructed of a big Fisk tire, is the old woman in the shoe with all of her kids, and just it's sensory overload. It's delicious and delirious.
It's really dense, and it's such a beautiful composition. The way it just sits on the picture plane is incredible.
That's right.
It's got
that's
a tremendous
right.
amount of weight to it. It's really beautiful.
Absolutely, and it comes to us again. It's been in the family of John Rustling Wood, who was the brilliant and sort of revolutionary advertising executive who worked with Parrish on these advertising series. And you think about that; these were series that were created before Coca-Cola, before what we think of, you know, the Hertz and all these sort of regular advertising campaigns that we're all so used to, consumerism, clickbait, as you said before, which is a great term. This was the clickbait. This was the clickbait for consumerism for decades, and these works still hold up today as much as they did a century ago. So we were very excited to have, in addition to the Boy Scouts of America art collection and combining forces together, to have such incredible museum quality works by Leindecker, Parrish, and Jessie Wilcox Smith in the auction as well. But I'll just touch briefly, because I want to hear more about Sarahjane, what she's got in the sale as well. But what you're seeing here is just a little snippet. We've got everything from Sargent. We've got a beautiful Hassan pastel. We've got a beautiful Ernie Barnes.
Oh, right.
Oh my gosh, Tennessee that belonged to Dinah Shore at one point. We've got, it really is an embarrassment of riches. That should be the name of the sale, the Embarrassment of Riches auction, because we've also got beautiful sculpture. We have a seminal Paul Manship work in the auction. We've got this Gaston Lachaise, which I go gaga for, this gorgeous carving. So sensual, so beautiful, so modern. And we've got that alongside regionalism, and we've got this spectacular Joseph Stella, beautiful symbolist abstract work that comes to us from the Newark Museum of Art, which was sort of a revolutionary museum and what they collected in terms of modern art. So to have this stela in the collection, in the auction from Newark is also really exciting. And I don't want to take up too much time to talk about myself because I'd like to hear more about what's in Sarahjane's auction as well.
I mean, I want to go back to when you were talking about that parish, because when you were talking about that parish, it was making me think about one of the great gifts of this sale is that we're going to be offering some highlights from the Frank collection of science fiction and fantasy art. And the Frank collection, we at Heritage, it was well before my time, but have been lucky enough to get to offer the majority of this truly historic collection of Jane Frank and her late husband Howard, who they were collecting early. They were collecting the best of the best. They were doing incredible scholarship around what they were collecting. Just true passionate collectors, true fans in the science fiction fandom world. And we would not have as robust an understanding of any of this art if it hadn't been for people like the Franks. And so we did these 3 sales in the past, but Jane hung on to some of her favorite works. And in our sale this season, we are offering a special standalone section of some of these works that she held on to, these treasures, including this Rudy Bolarski. This was a Argosy cover in 1939. It is illustrating a scene from one of the stories from John Carter of Mars. If you're familiar with John Carter of Mars, if you're not, it's truly one of the most important science fiction franchises of all time, and it really created a lot of the conventions that you think of when you think of sci-fi, when you think of kind of the impossible hero against impossible odds and impossible places, and that's on full display.
That's so true. And while you're speaking about these incredible works, I'm sort of blown away by these. The work that you were just discussing on the end really gobsmacked me when I walked into the studio. And when I see them hanging, we're sort of leading collectors into the next generation of collecting, because everybody, every auction house, every gallery, anyone who is selling art, in the business of selling art, is grappling with the same challenge of bringing in a new generation of buyers. How do you get someone who's 30 years old to start thinking and evolve into a collector of Sargent in years down the road? And the way you do that is you show them together and explain.
You build that bridge.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so, when I look at these works, I really do think about how it makes you sort of understand a lot of these artists that were struggling with how they were perceived by an audience when they came forward, like the ash can, how they were they said their art was not as beautiful and refined as a Sargent. It looked like it belonged in a garbage can. That was revolutionary at the time. Same thing with illustration. When you look at a work like this, you think, it reminds me a little bit of Otto Dix and degenerate art. This almost like this caricatured, sensory overload, incredible depictions. And if now I understand better from you why the colors are so saturated, but it also makes me think about old master painters who worked in gesso, and they used to the tempera and get these thick, juicy colors like that. That reminds me of a Bruegel in some ways also.
Right.
You start to really think about art, even going back to the caves of Lascaux until now, how they really does all relate to each other. I am loving this moment of seeing all this American art together. And yes, it's all American art.
It is. It's interesting too, because one of the things that Heritage understands is that nostalgia and sentimentality is a big selling point. And from boomers, Gen X, millennials, and younger, the idea of pulp, movies, comics, these things that we get our imagery from to begin with, or those of us who were in Walden Books in the 70s, the Brothers Hildebrandt is a great example of that. And the stuff does make it into our veins through these channels. And so a parish can look great to a person who's never seen a parish before because they love the Brothers Hildebrandt. And this just works.
So we're just starting the conversation in everybody's mind. We're building something here, and it really is a way to reintroduce American art with underscoring the fact that illustration art is the perhaps cornerstone of the entire genre of American art.
Right. Well, so that means on November 15th, we have just a bounty of excellent American art and illustration art.
And we're
led by
taking it on
these
the
two.
road.
And
Yeah.
yeah, you are, that's right. So it'll be here to be previewed. Do we know the date for that?
Well, we're actually previewing the week of October 15th in Dallas. We are heading with highlights to Chicago, or the following week of October 21st. Then we're in Palm Beach around the 29th. And then we land, the big event is in New York. We're hosting a joint exhibition for about 10 days.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good.
At our New York flagship. So we'll be there just talking about American art together and illustration art for a very days to come.
All right, well, tune in for all of that. And if you're in any of these cities, please take a look at this work in person. It's absolutely stunning. And thank you both for joining me today. And good luck with the sale.
Thank you.